Hey, welcome back, my friends. Today on Real World Wellness, I am thrilled to welcome Talor Stewart, an award-winning architect and the founder of Conscious Home Design, a philosophy and practice he's spent more than 20 years developing to help people live their lives more fully by reconnecting mind, body, and environment. Taylor's work reframes the way we think about our living spaces, showing us the places that we inhabit do more than just house us. They influence how we feel, how we move, how we connect with others, and even how well our daily routines can support our own health and happiness. This is the reason I was super intrigued when Taylor reached out all the way from Vermont to chat about coming on the pod. Now, I personally love making my home feel welcoming and zen and spacious. And so I feel like we're all going to really love this conversation and walk away feeling very inspired. So, whether you own, rent, or are currently navigating quirks of your current home or moving, Taylor brings an inspirational, informative, and deeply actionable message about the mind body environment connection. And most importantly, how small but intentional shifts in our spaces can create flow, ease, and meaning in our lives. We'll dive into how mindful design can reduce friction, support well-being, and help us feel more in alignment with who we are and who we want to become, no matter what four walls we are living in. So I'm very excited about this conversation, Taylor. And where I would love to start is, where did this all come from? What inspired you to create this incredible business that is Conscious Home Design?
Yeah. Hi, Alex. Wow, that was a extremely thorough overview of conscious home design and not so much the methodology, but the actual impact and why it's so valuable and important. Our experience really is shaped by the world around us. And since we're spending so much time in the home, half our lives is spent in the home. And for those who are working from home, even, up to 90% of their life is spent in the home. That environment's going to have um, some influence. And so we just want to be thoughtful and mindful about the way we shape it so that it's influencing us to our advantage, and putting that to work in our favor. So, um, you know, I always knew I would write a book, even back to my college days. I just didn't expect that it was going to take me 20 years to get it out to market. Like if you had asked 25-year-old Taylor what my career trajectory was going to look like and what my goals were and my milestones, I thought that the book might have come out probably, 5, maybe 10 years in, but it took 20 years. And, it is what it is. Things unfold in their own time. And it took me that long to really crystallize um, all the, you know, years of practice and research and experience that I'd had into something that was super boiled down, condensed to these are the real things that matter, based on science, not aesthetic preferences. I like red or I like blue. Those matter too. But underneath of that, there are some more universal principles. And I found in college that architecture, we're a pretty thoughtful bunch, architects are, and we want to ground all of our choices in some sort of rational decision. Hey, I chose this material or this thing because it solves this problem or has this, benefit or something. Everything is very um, highly intentional. But I found that so much of architecture, um, it's very style centric or very building centric. And, you know, there's value to that because you have to, you are studying and you're working with sticks and bricks and you want them to stand up and do their job. You want a building to perform and, you need it to be useful. But I found that still to my liking, architecture, the broad practice of architecture was more building focused and less human focused. And so I found it to be highly intentional, yet unconscious. And so my book, Conscious Home Design, and my company, Conscious Home Design, that actually came out of an old college paper that I wrote where I was talking about unconscious design. And I said, compared to, um, primitive humankind that didn't have shelter, creating shelter now has increased our life expectancy. We're able to protect ourselves from the elements, maintain better hygiene and better nutrition, and so it's really, it's practically doubled our life expectancy. So architecture helps us live longer. However, um, there's so much more to know about, um, we're not done evolving. Right now, average life expectancy is still less than 100 years. And, I'm sure, um, if we keep going, productively, several hundred years from now, 500 years from now, who knows when, but, average life expectancy will be over 100, and you'll have people living to be 125, 130 years old, fairly regularly. And that's not only because of medical advances that we will make. That also has to do with lifestyle advances and understanding the mind body environment connection, inherent stress responses, um, what actually the science of human happiness and human excellence. And so in the past sort of 100 years since we've come up with, heating and cooling and refrigeration and, plumbing, hot and cold water and electricity. And, since we've sort of modernized into this new sort of era, the basic program, the basic function of a home or a living space is essentially kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, hangout space, sort of four basic activities. And three of those are just physical. It's just shelter. It's just taking care of the needs of the physical needs of the body. But we all know that we're more than that. We have our higher needs. Maslow, the hierarchy of human needs pyramid, says, well, we have love and belonging needs and connection. We have creative expression needs. We also have needs for self-growth and personal development, so that we feel like we're stretching and growing and becoming, more and greater and stretching into our possibilities. And so, when you look at the basic program of a home, it doesn't touch on those higher needs. It's still very shelter focused. Giving someone, shelter, even beautiful shelter, is not a guarantee of happily ever after or living your best life. And everyone's out there waving their flag, hey, live your best life. But if you can't define what that looks like, what does best life mean for Alex? Then then you're just hoping. It's just like put a blindfold and throw a dart and hope you hit it. It's like it's leaving too much up to chance. And so, if the home is thought of as just beautiful shelter, then you're basically hoping that you're going to get those other personal growth and development and fulfillment opportunities out in the world, and which may or may not happen, and especially if you're working from home and you're experiencing more isolation, than you would be at a job, or if you're in a type of your place of work is limited with the way you can branch out and whether the career advancement opportunities or the social network, whatever comes with that, you may or may have different chances, and opportunities there. And so if you can start at home, which is the place where you have the most control in theory, then that's the best place to start to, ensure that you are meeting your higher needs. But if the space doesn't support your goal, like for instance, you say, I want to prepare 3 nutritious meals a day, but your kitchen is just a mini fridge and a microwave, like a college dorm room, that's going to be very difficult. The space isn't supporting your stated goal. And so you're going to have to work extra hard to overcome that friction of not having a supportive environment. So as an architect, I'm saying, okay, let's look at what the higher needs really are. Let's look at what the science of human excellence has to say about what best life and happily ever after really mean. Let's look at the data there first. That's true for all, it's universally true. And then from that foundation, then let's look at what's individually true for you in your home, and then layer that on top of that. And now we have a framework that we can actually deliver something that is statistically significant, significantly more likely to help you actually hit those goals of happily ever after,
Mm,
whatever that looks like and means for you. So this is what conscious home design is. And architecture in general is not that. So, the program hasn't changed in 100 years, even though the styles and technologies have upgraded. Architecture has not, the humanities, whether it's, medicine or nutrition or fitness or psychology and all, mental stuff, mind body connection, emotional stuff, all of this, chemistry and everything, hormones and all of the stuff that the sciences of the humanities have learned. They've made a quantum leap in the past 100 years. We know so much more about human happiness, but architecture has not um, taken enough from those other disciplines to incorporate that knowledge into the practice. And so architecture is
mhm.
still a little bit in a bubble, I would say, still designing buildings focused on styles and cool technologies and materials and stuff, which is all good stuff. It's all great. But I'm just looking to connect it more consciously with people, because I believe that the highest calling of architecture is to help people live happily ever after. If we had a planet full
Mm,
of the most beautiful architecture, but there was no people there, like, what's the point?
yeah, yeah,
you know what
yeah. Oh, I love
I mean?
that so much, Taylor, and it really draws out the importance of the word conscious in the name of your business and what you do. And it's funny, no matter who I chat to on here or what topic we dive into, be it nutrition, movement, nervous system rituals, architecture, this piece around
Yeah.
intentionality and being thoughtful about who we are, what we value, and the life we want to live always seems to be at the core of the conversation. It's so fascinating. And in
Yeah.
relation to this, we built our home here just over a year ago. And I think about before that, the
Yeah.
amount of times I moved and sort of just followed a cookie cutter blueprint approach to moving into a home or building a home. It's like we have a kitchen, and
Mhm.
so we put pots and pans in there and we cook there. And we have a lounge, so we put a couch and a TV in there. And that's just how it goes. But how powerful
Mhm.
it is to think about, what is the life that I want to live? How do I want to feel in this space? And how can I curate that based on that? And it makes me think of something I invite my clients to do, which is to create a space in their home which is dedicated to their wellness. So if they want to be a person who gets up in the morning and does yoga every day, then they need to make a space that invites that and enables that and makes that easy. It's like, how do we remove the friction, hey, to doing the thing that you say you want to do, or being
Totally.
the person you say you want to be? It's so, so
100%.
powerful.
Yes.
You mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'd love to double click on that, Taylor, and talk a little bit more about how you've mapped them onto a home. Can you explain how that works for us?
Sure. So when I looked at the average home, I said, okay, we're only meeting some of the needs. We're meeting physical needs for security, safety, sleeping, bathing, eating. And we're meeting some of our, connection needs with the people we live with. If we have a living room, or a lounge or a family room or a hangout space, I'm just calling it generically hangout space, place to be with others, whether that's a living room, a dining room, or, whatever it's, whatever you're doing there, you're doing it together. Um, it's not, addressing creative expression needs, a creative space. It's not developing, it's not just, dedicating a space for inner development, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's studying or whether that's meditation or journaling, or whether that is some sort of, prayer or mindfulness, however you sort of enrich your inner life. Let's make sure we've dedicated some space for that. And because the act of dedicating space to an activity does a couple of things. You touched on it, like giving people opportunity, removing friction to do that activity. We talked about, the kitchen. It's like if your kitchen is not there, then you have a hard time preparing food, right? And so the act of dedicating space, first off, it gives you the opportunity to even do that activity. You suddenly have the ability to do it. If you don't have a bathroom, then it's hard to keep yourself clean, right? And so, and it's the same thing with everything you do. And so, if you say, I want to set up a mindfulness or a prayer practice, but you have no place that's dedicated to doing that, then you have to overcome your environment every single time you want to practice. And so that's a friction point. It's a resistance. And so, dedicating space to it just automatically removes a friction point. But there's also something about the environment, the feedback we get, even at a subconscious level from our environment. When we see something in our life, for instance, a creative space, even if we're not going in there, but we know that it's there available to us, then that's sending a signal, hey, things that are valuable to me, things that are important, things on my, that's a core value to me and that feed me and enrich my life are possible for me. Yes, I may not be spending all my time in there, but I know I could, anytime I want, go in there. And that sets up a positive feedback loop. It says to you that your world around you says, hey, things that my life works. I have opportunities to do things that are meaningful for me. That's a very optimistic frame of reference to live from. Conversely, if you're like, well, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I just can't do it because there's no space, or I don't have any opportunities to do that, then you're walking around life with one of your arms tied behind your back, and that can be very frustrating and limiting. And over time, that can, it starts to dampen that optimistic enthusiasm that you can have for life. And so there's a physical thing, but there's also an internal thing. And this is what I'm talking about, the mind body environment connection. What signals are we getting from the environment around us? Is it signaling to us that life is possible and we're welcome to grow and stretch into our potential? Or is it signaling that no, things are really difficult and you've got to really fight hard to overcome? And so, look, the human will is super powerful. In any given moment, we can dig down deep and draw on resources we might not even have realized we had and overcome a challenge, and Instagram and Guinness Book of World Records and the Olympics, they're all full of these moments where people have, broken the limitations, broken through into new possibilities. And we celebrate these moments because we love it, But these are breach moments. If you think about that whale that uses all of its effort and all of its might and it launches itself out of the ocean, it's very majestic. We love that. But it's just for a moment, because then gravity takes over and it falls back in. And we're the same way. We're not going through life every minute of every day, dial all the way up to turned all the way up, because we can't. We don't have that much energy. It's like just thinking takes 20% of your calorie expenditure. And the mind is always looking to economize. That's what habits are for. They save us. If we had to make a decision fresh about every single thing we did, we'd never get anything done. We have to go on a conservative sort of go with the flow and be more routine about our lives. And so it's those moments where the environment is going to have its impact. Yes, in any given moment we can overcome, but 24/7, like that tree root growing under a sidewalk, it's going to put that slow, constant pressure, and wood is softer than cement, but it's going to move the sidewalk over time from that constant, steady pressure. And so our environment is putting a constant, steady pressure on us. Sure, with if we turn up our volume, yeah, we can overcome all that stuff. But day after day, month after month, year after year, it's going to, that it's like the tortoise and the hare. It's going to, that slow and steady pressure is going to win. So, Yogananda said environment is stronger than willpower. And, that's part of what I just said is why, and Winston Churchill said, we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And so that's that's wisdom of both the East and the West, talking about how, the environment does have a whether we're aware of it or not, it puts an impact on us. So I'm looking at Maslow's hierarchy of human needs and saying, okay, we have love and belonging needs, and we're somewhat meeting them through our family room or our dining room. But we also have our creative expression needs. We have inner development needs. We have outer development needs, physical exercise. And so I'm going through all those, and I create, what I call the 9 essential spaces. And so that's how I build that. And I say, okay, well, if we do these things, then we're, essentially setting the stage for someone to grow into being having a very well-rounded existence and developing their personality to a greater extent. Gandhi said, I want freedom for the full expression of my personality. And so that's, you know, that's how I draw on Maslow's. There's a lot more than Maslow's to conscious home design, but that's a piece of it. It's one of the cornerstones, or it's
Mm.
not exactly a cornerstone, but one of the one of the models, one of the frameworks that we use.
I love it. I love it. It's particularly interesting to me. It takes me back to my university days. I studied human geography and social geography. And I've never before thought about the link to architectural design in a thesis that I wrote around this idea of effect. And it's around how people and places interact and impact each other or influence each other. And I did a study on a dance studio and how,
Mhm.
to that quote you shared by Winston Churchill, how when the dancers first walk into a space, they are impacted by its surround. But as they co-create in the space and kind of infuse their energy, it's almost like the space takes on that and it holds meaning and stories that it didn't before. And yeah, it's so fascinating. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
I'd love to
Yeah,
hear more about these 9 essential spaces that you recommend. What are they and why are they
sure,
important?
sure. So I list them in the book, in my book, Conscious Home Design. And the companion sort of workbook that goes with that is like spending time on each one and asking
Mm.
questions like, what would that look like for you as an individual?
Oh, I love
You're going to
that.
find that the quality of your questions determine the quality of your outcome. So if you ask better questions, you get better results. To your point earlier when you're talking about, oh, when I move, I just go through, okay, kitchen, the pots go in there, and you just sort of go through the motions there without necessarily asking new questions about the space. And so,
Mm.
like referencing Maslow and saying, well, what do you like to do for creative activity, Alex? Do you like dance, or do you like painting, or do you like playing the cello? How does creativity show up for you? And what do you like to do for personal growth? And so by asking those questions that some people didn't even know they could ask, that didn't even
I
occur to them
love
that they
that.
should be thinking about that, then you can start saying, okay, great, now that we have asked these questions, we can start to see if there's a way to support that in our homes and in the creation of our homes. So that's the functional piece. That's sort of the methodology of how we actually get there, is by asking the quality questions. um,
Nine.
so the 9 essential spaces are the heart of the home, the family room, the kitchen, dining, bedroom, bathroom, inner development, outer development, um, creative space, and the entry foyer. And so, um, the entry foyer is something that's frequently missed in many homes, and they just open the front door and you're right there in the great room, and maybe there's a coat rack or a closet, but it's all one big space. There's not a really good compartmentalization, and I want to see, ideally, um, an actual vestibule or a chamber, like a decompression chamber, because if
Oh,
you
I
think
like
of a
that.
plane coming in for a landing, it's and then when it hits the ground, the tires chirp and squeal, and there's a puff of smoke as they have to suddenly synchronize and get up to speed with the ground, and the plane has to get up at the same speed. And sometimes when I'm coming home from a busy day out and about, I feel like that plane, and I burst into the house with this, that, and I need a reception area, sort of a decompression place to stop and take a, I'm home. The contrast between the outside world, the chaos, the relative chaos that's going on out there, compared to the sanctuary of your home, the inside, the sacred versus
Yeah.
the profane, is dramatic. And to have a transition space between them is very helpful. And also, there's a lot of paraphernalia associated with dealing with the outside world. When you come in, you may have hats, umbrellas, boots, jackets, keys, bags, groceries, cell phone, purse, whatever. I mean, all sorts of things that come with that you don't need in the house. And so you have to unload all of this stuff, and where's it going to go? If you have a family of 5 coming into, and they just burst into the living room, or they burst into a tiny, something that's not size appropriate, a little 6 by 6, vestibule, then there's not enough room for everyone and all their stuff, and so that's going to be, it's going to be clutter prone, or they're going to come in, the kids are going to put their jacket on the floor or on the couch in the living room rather than, if there's not dedicated space for it, and so as an architect, I want to design size appropriate spaces, but also with enough storage and systems in place so that my boots always go here, my coat always goes here, my keys always go here, and that way it's clutter free, and it saves time and brain sweat because you're not running around in the morning going, "Where are my keys?" Well, you know exactly where your keys are. They're right here. That's where they always are. That's where they go. You set up a habit, a system,
I need
and
my
so
husband to listen to this because we have a dedicated place for our keys in our house, yet undoubtedly 3, 4 mornings a week I get, "Have you seen my keys?"
uh-huh. And
Uh,
and so right. And so there's a couple of solutions to that. One could be, okay, just hasn't worked enough to make that the habit. Is coming home
mhm.
distracted by other things. Oh, I'm doing,
Yes.
the dog is jumping on me, or the kids are doing this, and so that I'm supposed to put the keys there, but right now something is more demanding of my focus and attention, and so they're still in my pocket, or
Uh-huh,
whatever it is.
uh-huh.
So you have to figure out if is it a circumstantial thing, or is it simply just haven't created the habit, or maybe the location where the keys are supposed to go is actually inconvenient, and so it's not part of the
Mm,
natural flow in the cycle. There was an architect who was doing a college campus and designed all the buildings. And then the faculty looked at it, the board of directors looked at it and said, "Where are the pathways?" He said, "Wait a year." He said, "Just plant grass and wait after the first year. And wherever this grass is worn off and it's just dirt, pave those areas. Let the students tell you where the paths are
huh.
going to be, because we could
Oh,
pave
yeah,
it,
wow.
but they might not walk on it. They're going to walk the shortest path from there to get from point A to point B. They're not going to
Uh-huh.
take detours just to stay on the sidewalk." And so that's what they did. And so you could look at it and say, like, "Hey, my husband is always putting them over here. That's not the dedicated key zone." Well, okay, well maybe you should move the key
Yeah, meet
to
him
that
where he's at.
location
I
where
like that.
so right in the flow. So see, these are two different sort of, I'm not there, I'm not seeing it, but these are things that I would look for were
Mhm,
I, consulting with you personally and, in your home to try to create flow and routine and set up harmony in the home.
mhm.
Because once these things are in place, then the time you're spending interacting with one another isn't, "Hey, pick up your stuff," or "Help me find my keys," and these little things. It's now you can spend, instead of nagging each other about keeping clean and stuff, you can spend time interacting in ways that are fun and positive and
Uh-huh.
things that you want to be doing. And so it helps to sow harmony just by thoughtful architecture and design. So
Mm,
the vestibule is not only a decompression zone when you're coming home, but it also serves as a launch pad before you go out into the world. And so, you can things that I like to put in the foyer. When you come home, when you open the door, I want to put an image of something that's significantly, meaningful to you. So maybe it's a big picture of your family. Maybe it's a picture of um, a nature scene, or a spiritual figure, or something that reminds you of something that you love, a core value, something that's inspiring to you, something that brings you back to your center. Yes. And so when you come home, boom, you're reminded, you're putting your values right in front of you, again, setting up that mind
mm,
body environment connection. Little things that you can do to, you know, little 2% shifts here and there. And over time, it's like the butterfly effect. Little, the butterfly effect says that big outcomes have sensitive dependence on the initial conditions. Do the
mm.
flapping of a butterfly's wings in Brazil eventually set off a tornado in Texas?
Uh-huh.
And so this mathematician wrote that paper. That was the title of his paper, and he did a talk about it. And he basically charted, logarithmically, how little things become big things. And
Mm,
so while it's true that not all little things become big things, all big things started as little things. And so if you want big outcomes in your life, Start intentional, start small with these little things. And over time, that snowball effect, or that butterfly effect, those ripples can grow like compounding interest. In a retirement account, the difference between a 5% rate of return and a 7% rate of return over time, it will double your outcome. Just
Uh-huh.
that 2% difference doubles your results with time. So imagine you're living in your home for decades. What if you go around and 2% here, 2% there, and every day it's 8% more
Yes.
flow, 8% more
Uh-huh.
stress. What would that do over years of your life?
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it really captures the essence of real world wellness and my coaching is it doesn't have to be hard and it doesn't have to feel big and overwhelming. Just these
Yeah,
tiny shifts and things that are easy to weave into your life can be profound over time. And I'm also
yeah,
thinking, Taylor, when you speak to the entranceway about the neuroscience behind buffers between activities. So obviously we have the amygdala in our brain, which acts like a bodyguard and is always on the lookout for potential dangers and threats. And it sometimes takes a while to catch up with our body. So if we've been out driving our car and our amygdala's on, keeping us safe, we may well get our body at home into the house, but the amygdala is still in hyperdrive, right? And so a nice little ritual I like to share with clients is when they step in that front door is pausing for a moment. And I love that term you use around decompression, using that
mhm,
entranceway as a moment for the amygdala to catch up, to recognize that it's safe
mhm,
now and it can kind of chill out so that the nervous
mhm.
system can regulate. And there's a few little beautiful like techniques you can do even in the entranceway, like rubbing hands down arms and things just to really ground and center and
Nice,
treat it like that decompression chamber. So yeah, I love that. I love the science and the
great.
architectural design piece behind that.
You touched on another point a couple of times so far, and I'm glad you brought it up again just this time because I forgot to. It's such a rich conversation. You've been bringing up so many points. I keep talking about them, but then I get into that one. I forget to go back to the other one. So thank you for bringing it up again, and that is compartmentalization. So there are some spaces that lend themselves very well to being connected or being adjacent to one another, kitchen and dining areas, right? It's convenient to have them nearby so you don't have to carry your plates of food all the way across the house to get from one room to the other. Having them side by side just makes, it's very practical, to have that sort of adjacency. And if the family routine happens to be that one of the adults is in the afternoon preparing food for an evening meal, but kids need to be doing homework, but some kids at a certain age or certain personality, they just want to be alone and study and just focus on their stuff, but others, they want proximity. They want to be near the action, and they're going to feel like that's going to help them. They don't want to be alone. They want to be a part of what's going on, and they'll study even better if other people are around. you know and also maybe they might need help and they want to reach out with a question. Hey, what do I do with this? And so that kind of together time. And so having a place for kids to do homework that are in proximity to adults for some children, for their personalities, and at some ages and stages in their development, that's appropriate. And so understanding how people move in space can help us decide what rooms or what spaces need to be adjacent. Do you want them working at the dining room table because they're going to have to clean it up and then before setting the table for the meal? Or do you want to have a homework nook nearby that's dedicated just for that, so that things can stay there when it's time for dinner or time for, and you don't get food on your homework papers, or vice versa, right? And so understanding how proximities work is very useful. And so we're talking about dedication, dedicating a homework station, homework zone. It's not the dining room table or not the kitchen counter or whatever. Many people use that. It's okay, but it ends up being a friction point because you have to clean up from one activity before you can do the next. And so when you can dedicate space, it allows you to just do that thing and leave it there and come back to it. And that's very convenient, when you're able to do that. There's another thing about compartmentalization that's very powerful for us. And that is, like you touched on with the dance studio, is the energy that we bring starts to charge up a space. It's like we bring intention with us, and we bring there's something that happens psychologically that's it's really just association. Just the same way that Pavlov would ring the bell and the dog would salivate before getting food. It would ring. Pavlov would ring this bell and then feed the dogs, and after a while he noted that he could just ring the bell and the dogs would start to salivate even though there was no food, because they anticipated food would come next. Yes. And so we have a similar, physiological response from associations. And so we can walk into the bedroom and suddenly feel sleepy or yawn. We can walk into the kitchen and get hungry. We can walk into the living room or the family room and start thinking about watching TV or telling stories. It will evoke conversation consciousness. Bedrooms will pull out sleep consciousness from us. And so some of that is just association. But, if you want to, get a little more sensitive, you can say, well, there's also an energetic charge that happens in that space. And our body as like an antenna or a radio is somehow sensitive to that frequency. And we're picking up on that. And we start to vibrate at that frequency in the same way that you can hit a tuning fork and it starts vibrating here, you strike it. And then you bring one here that you haven't touched on anything, but when you bring it in proximity, it starts to vibrate too. And they vibrate sympathetically with each other. And so I believe that the body and the mind are also like tuning forks, and we will start to vibrate in harmony with the frequencies that we come into contact with. And so compartmentalizing is helpful on multiple levels. One is there's just a mental association with it. But two is when a space is dedicated to a certain activity, it develops its own energetic momentum. And so if you're sitting there going, oh, I'm just tired today. I don't think I want to go and dance. I want to take it easy. I want to put my feet up. If you just get dressed and make a routine out of putting on your dance clothes and your shoes or slippers or footwear or whatever it is, just stepping into that room has that momentum. It will give you a little lift and it will help you get over that resistance hurdle. And so the environment is somehow supporting you beyond just creating opportunity for you to do it because you have a dance studio, but there's also something else. If the dance studio was also the family room, or the dining room, you just push the table aside, it wouldn't have that same oomph, that momentum that would help you. It would be a physical space, and so it would help you there, but it's not dedicated, and so it has mixed vibrational frequencies happening in that space. And so I'm a big fan for dedicating space, which is what I call 9 essential spaces. And some of them can blend and be open to each other, but others need to be compartmentalized so that's dedicated. Ideally, conscious home design is not an all or nothing proposition. Conscious home design will meet you wherever you are and just look for, where you are currently being well supported and where there are gaps or opportunities. And then you can, sort of look around and say, well, sure, I have a gap here and here and here. Which one is the low hanging fruit? Which one would be the most profound for me to make a shift in? And I can start there and just see, and take it one step at a time in little ways. Sure, if you build a brand new home, that's a quantum leap in being able to shape your future, because to the degree that you can shape your home and your life, you get to shape your destiny. And so, a quantum leap is just being able to start from scratch and you say, hey, here's what we're going to do. But if you don't have that ability, then these little things can be done, and they can add up and become very, very powerful.
Taylor, can we speak to the person listening who might live in a smaller space and maybe doesn't have not necessarily the 9 dedicated areas? Are there, I don't know, hacks or ways that they can work with a smaller home without kind of feeling overwhelmed by the task?
Well over 90% of the floor plans that I see out there do not support what I call the 9 essential spaces. Even though they have enough physical space to do it, it's just not chopped up and allocated in such a way we're not dedicating it in the right way. And so you don't need to have a mansion, with a cottage of 900 square feet is like 100 square meters roughly. So 100 square meters, is plenty enough space for a person to have the 9 essential spaces in it, or a well-aligned couple. And then I like to add an extra, an extra 30 30 some odd square meters per person as we
Hmm.
so we can design, if we're intentional about it, even a small space to support all of our human needs, and all of the things from our higher needs as well as our basic needs. That said, because 90% of the floor plans I see out there don't support that, people need to do the assessment. They need to, I think having a framework and knowing what questions to ask is very useful, which is why I created the Conscious Home Design book and the worksheets to go along with it, so that you can, so I'm specifically asking you questions that you forgot to ask or didn't know to ask. And then by doing that, you feel out and it's like, oh, okay, now I know. And knowing's half the battle, right? Once you know, now you have a measuring stick. You've built the yardstick, which you can look through and say, hey, what's lining up? And you can see where your gaps are. And once you have a gap, you can say, oh, okay, here's something that could help me. Do I have an opportunity to solve that challenge within my existing space? I'm saying that I want to have a meditation practice, but I don't have the luxury of dedicating a whole room. I don't have a spare bedroom where the kids have gone off to college now, and I've got a room that I can turn into my meditation space. Yet every time I go into my bedroom, I feel like sleeping, not meditating. So what can I do? And it's like, well, maybe there's a spot where you can get one of those screen dividers, those carved carved screens, or something, a Japanese motif, or something, like a room divider, a partition, and carve off just a corner, or a little alcove, and say, okay, that's my zone where I'm going to do meditation, and I only meditate when I'm in that space, and when I'm in that space, all I do is meditate. I don't also do, journaling or podcasting or whatever. It's dedicated for just one activity and that activity alone. And so looking for little ways to compartmentalize, it here and there, or setting up a corner or an alcove or a dedicated little bit of wall space, like, hey, I have this goal to run a half marathon, and it's like, okay, great. Is there a spot where, if the weather's bad out, you can set up a treadmill in the house, and there where that treadmill is, can you also set up pictures of you running smaller races in the past? Maybe a picture of your trainer who's helping you, develop yourself. Maybe a picture of a sports hero who you take inspiration from. Maybe some ribbons or medals that awards that you've won in the past, or writing a pretend one out as a vision thing of something you hope to hit in the future. And so now you have visuals in that space. So even when you're not there physically running and practicing, just every time you walk by, you're reminded of your goals, how you're supported, where you've been in the past, your history and that momentum you have that you carry with you, but also your goals in your future that you're looking to step into. And so you have, again, that feedback loop from your environment is keeping you on target and towards your goals. And that can be just a little piece of wall space in an apartment. You don't have to have a whole home gym to hit your goal in that way.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Are you with me?
100%. It's so powerful. Those visual cues are so great. Hey, I'm aware of our time, Taylor, but one thing I really want to ask you about, because I am a big believer in natural light and the power of the sun, is this sunny
Mhm.
window effect that you talk to.
Yeah,
Can you speak to how
yeah,
sunlight in our home can support our mood, the energy of the home, motivation, all the
sure.
things?
Yeah, the sunny window effect is a term that I coined. I noticed even as a kid, when I was hanging out in a room, whether I was playing a game or reading a book, whatever, there would be, you know, sun would be streaming in through a window, but occasionally a cloud would roll by and it would block it out, and then there'd be shadow, and and the room would go dim, and then the cloud would pass by, depending on what the wind speed was, and then suddenly the room would illuminate again, and whoosh, and it gets so much brighter. And I found that no matter how beautifully decorated and well designed a space is, it's that much more inviting. when the sun is filling it up, when the sun is streaming in. And I noticed that the family pets, both the dog and the cat, whenever they were going to go take a nap, they'd be curled up right in the sunny patch. It was
Uh-huh.
like if that sunbeam was coming in, that's where they would be. And it's like light is life. We're inherently instinctually attracted and drawn to the light. And so as an architect who wants to help create space that's going to truly not just say it as a cool catchphrase, but actually help people live their best life. I say, okay, look, if you have something that you say is a goal or is a priority for you, if Alex says, look, I've been busy with these other things, when life gets busy, we have responsibilities, whether it's family or job or whatever our responsibilities are. Some of the first things that we cut out of our routine are um, personal things that feed us personally.
Hmm.
Whether it's exercise,
The things
oh,
that
I've got
will most
bad
support
body.
us through the stresses.
Exactly. The things that feed us and keep us connected with our, with our own humanity are the first things typically that get sacrificed so that we can meet our obligations. And so what I'm looking to do is dedicate some space in the home so that those things, well, yes, I used to play cello an hour a day before I had this demanding job or before baby number 3 hit the came in, and I don't have time for that anymore. But if the cello is locked up in a case in the closet and all you have is 10 minutes, no cello is going to happen today. But if the cello is safely stored, near a bright sunny window with a dust cloth to protect it, then if you only have 10 minutes, you can just take a few steps over, take it up, and play a few scales or play one song.
Mm,
And that's not an hour, but it's still something, and it feeds you and it keeps the spark alive. And again, any little step you take in the direction of your goals and your dreams sets up that positive feedback loop and mirrors back to you, hey, what is valuable to me is possible and achievable. And so that's a little bit about setting up, your personal goals so that as you go through life, you don't wake up one day, 10 years going, oh my God, I feel like I'm drowning or suffocating or starving because all those things have been on hold. And so you don't want to have a crisis moment. If we can support you all throughout, then it's more gentle. Transitions and phases happen as a natural course of life. But those transitions, when they come, can be more gentle and less dramatic when we're well supported along the way, rather than being, rather than sacrificing things and living an unbalanced sort of
yes.
life there.
Like if we've got multiple tethers keeping us anchored and grounded, then we're never going to completely float off, no matter what kind of, what winds come through.
That's the goal, right? The goal is to have a home that really anchors us and keeps
Mm,
us well connected, not only to our family and our loved ones and the people we share space with, but also to ourselves, our own
mm,
values and our own, our own personality. It's about living a balanced life so that we can become a well-rounded individual that's it's enriched by a diverse a diverse experience, diverse we're well supported, and the sunny window effect helps us do that. For instance, if you're saying, I want to have a practice in, choose something XYZ, but your dedicated activity space to do that thing is in the cellar downstairs where there's no light and the air qualities, it's all dank and dusty or musty, it's no good. Then if you're short on time or you um, you know are low energy, then the space that you're going to is not inviting, it's not welcoming, and it doesn't help you get over the resistance hurdle to performing the activity. But if we take that, if you say, if Alex, you came to me and said, Taylor, look, I've been neglecting my cello playing for the last 5 years because life has gotten busy, but I really need to cultivate. I've got time now I want to make a my New Year's resolution is to now do this thing. And I said, okay, great. If that's what you're telling me, because it's not my job to tell you what you need. Your job is to tell me. My job is just to ask the questions. Hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? What do you like to do for that? And then by asking quality questions, I can listen to your answers and say, okay, here's how we can build that in. Here's how we can prioritize to help me prioritize this list so we know what's most meaningful and impactful for you. And then once we know that, once we have your list, your ultimate wish list, dream home wish list, and prioritize, now I can set about dedicating space that works in flow. And so I say, let's find a space that is appropriate, but also inviting and welcoming so that you want to go there. Even when you're feeling like, oh, I just don't want to, make myself practice and do the scales. It's like there's some discipline that can be involved, in trying to go after something. And so you want to use the environment to help you. And so the sunny window effect is just something that we can, whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. I know a guy who he has a home office, but he never spends time in there. He always brings his laptop out and sets it up at the dining room table because the dining room happens to have glass on two sides and it's very sunny and bright, and he has a view of the birds coming to the feeders and the garden and everything. And so that's where he wants to be. It makes total sense. He's naturally drawn to the vital space, whereas the office is dark with no view, and not inspiring. And so that's simply just a bad design, in his home. He didn't design a home. I helped him make some modifications, but the home was already pre-existing before he brought me in as to help him with that. And so that was his existing condition. And so I'm saying, okay, what are the activities that are valuable to you? Can we support those through using the sun and our natural draw, or pull to expose ourselves to that light?
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It's so great. Oh, I feel like we've just scratched the surface today, but yet we've had so much
We have.
wisdom shared by you. Thank you. As we wrap up,
Sure.
Talor, for everybody listening, if you could suggest or invite one thing that they can go away and do right now, whether they're designing a home or they currently live in a space or they're moving or whatever, what would that be? What would be a real game changer for them that would move the needle that's also easy?
Um, The Harvard study of adult happiness tells us that relationships are the single biggest predictor of our life expectancy and our happiness. Quality relationships. And we have our giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships, whether we're showing up as the primary giver or whether there's an equal exchange, like with our peers, or if we're the receiver, as with our elders or mentors or inspirational figures. And so finding opportunities to have, the type of relationships that we want to call in most, whether we're looking to have more reciprocal relationships or more receiving relationships, we want to feel loved and nurtured, or whether we're like, hey, I've been hanging out with my friends all the time, but I'm really not giving much. I really want to have a giving relationship. I want to start giving back, and so maybe you want to start mentoring, or doing some coaching, or maybe it's going to start a family and have kids. But even pets, plants, and animals constitute a giving relationship, And so I would look for opportunities to cultivate relationships in the home, whether that's just putting up a picture of someone that loves you and wants the best for you, so you can remember what it feels like to receive love and wisdom and care. And that also shortcuts our success. When we consult with people who have gone before us, then we make less mistakes and we get to our goals faster, with their consultations. It's why we hire experts to help us, doctors and lawyers and professionals to help us get to where, coaches to help us get to where we want to go. We can figure stuff out on our own, but do we really want to spend all the years it takes to do that? Whereas if we hire an expert, they're going to get us there much more quickly. So relationship is the big one. But a very simple thing that anyone can do that's super easy, aside from putting up some photos, and like we talked about when you're coming home and about to leave, giving you something on the wall, whether it's a quote or an image or a photograph that reminds you of your values and what's important to you and your why, so when you come home and before you leave, you have those reminders of that. That's very powerful, that anyone can do. But one more thing that's super powerful that also anyone can do is bring some plants into the home. And the reason this is true is that, like I said, no matter how beautiful a room is, it's so much more welcoming when the sun is shining in. This is instinctually true. It's because our bodies, humans did not evolve inside of architecture. We evolved in nature. Nature
Mm,
is our natural habitat. So no matter, yes, when you come in from the chaos of the world and you come home, you go, and you feel safe and you can relax and you can let go. And, it's relatively stress-free compared to outside. The fact of the matter is it's still a foreign environment, and at some level, it's going to cue the body to saying you're not in your natural element, and it's going to elicit a mild stress response. No matter how
mm,
beautiful your home is, it's still going to be
wow.
stressful to the physical body. But when you bring plants and you see leaves and green growing things, there's a physiological response. It happens automatically, subconsciously. Your breath becomes
Wow.
deeper. The heart, which oxygenates the blood, which means the heart doesn't have to beat as fast, and so heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, stress reduces, and that in turn over time can increase life expectancy, because we know that stress is the killer, silent killer of us. And so bringing plants into the home, as many as you can fit, do it, and so even if you have a black thumb, you're like, oh, I kill all my plants, don't worry, plants are cheap, go buy some more. you know Go to the garden center, and tell them, hey, I want to put plants in these rooms, and here's the directions they face. This one's going to get direct sun, this one won't, just indirect light, and they'll help you choose plants that will be appropriate for the different spaces in your home. And that way, when you're in your home and you see green growing things, it's gonna your home is gonna be sending signals. Hey, you're in your natural environment. You can relax even that much more. And then there's
Mm,
also the air quality benefits on top of that from the plants. You're also
of
cultivating a little
course.
bit of a giving relationship. There's a little bit of nurturing that's happening there, and so it's getting you out of the own bubble of just me, 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 and you're thinking, it's expanding your circle of awareness. And it seems so simple, but it's
Mm,
so powerful. Please put
yeah.
plants, put plants in your home. I've got a big jade tree right behind me here, and I've got a big plant here on the window next to me. And, it just, when we see plants, it automatically triggers ease.
Yeah, and isn't it funny? I have a lot of plants at home too, and I just kind of innately felt drawn to put them in places. But it is obviously like a subconscious, like deep physiological draw to bring nature inside because that is where we come from. It's so powerful. I've never
There's
thought of it
science
like that
behind
before.
it. Yeah. Hmm.
And you have a resource, do you, Taylor, on your website around house plants? I think I saw that
I
pop up.
do
Is that
actually. Yeah.
still available?
Yeah, sure. It is, yeah. So you can go to my website, conscioushomedesign.com, and you can get a free PDF of the 5 most effective plants for indoor air quality. And there's a couple bonus plants on there that are, pet safe. If you got animals that like to chew on the leaves, you want to make sure you got pet safe, pet friendly plants that aren't toxic for them. So there's a couple of plants on there that are listed as safe for cats and dogs, and
Yeah,
that's free.
awesome.
So also,
Amazing. I'll
they're
be sure
there.
to share that one in the show notes and also your
Yeah,
book.
you can put the link in the
Um,
show notes. Yeah. You can also order the
yeah,
book and the workbook and the audiobook if you want as an instant digital download on the website while you're there, conscioushomedesign.com. And if you want to pick my brain and get a consultation, I'm happy to, there's a contact me form. Just reach out. I'm happy to help. I do projects all over, even
uh-huh.
internationally, and I certainly can do consultations internationally. So, um, yeah, I'd be happy to help if anyone wants to uh, tell me about their dream home or their vision, whatever they're trying to do.
Amazing. You have offerings for people at every stage, which is so wonderful.
That's right.
We're potentially going to be thinking about building it again in the next couple of years, and the first thing I'll be doing is obviously working through those questions, the prompts in your book, but yeah, potentially also reaching out because
Sure, reach out. I can help
it's
with
just so
with even
fascinating.
some floor plans for that. And so, in the end, you'll
Yeah,
use a local
cool.
engineer to get the codes, but we can work on some of the concept designs to make sure that it has the right
So
flow
cool.
for you if you want. Be
Yeah,
happy to work
so,
with you.
so cool. And where else can people connect with you and learn from you, Taylor? Social media, those sorts of things?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not highly active there, but I do have a presence. Yeah, I'm just at Conscious Home Design, and you can find me everywhere. And on LinkedIn, if you want to connect with me, it's just Talor Stewart. It's just my name. Um, Maybe you can put links to my social channels in the show notes if you want as well
Yeah,
for people
absolutely.
to reach out.
Absolutely. Oh, it's been such an incredible conversation. You used the word earlier, Taylor, alchemy, and that's kind of what's
Mm-hmm.
really resonating for me, and that's what's sitting on top now is what power we have and what opportunity we have to create alchemy in our home, and to
Mm-hmm.
really, really make it something that is conducive to, as you say, our best life and to really thriving. And I just love the thought and intentionality behind what you offer. I'm very grateful for this conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Alex. Really, really glad to connect with you. Thanks.
Yeah, so awesome. Thank you. And for all our listeners, we'd love to hear your feedback, questions, comments. Share this with anybody you know who is going to benefit from it. And yeah, as always, thank you for tuning in, and we will chat to you soon.